Think about how many times you make decisions every day. We make hundreds, maybe even thousands of decisions every day, anywhere from deciding which cereal to eat, what to wear, how many times you press the snooze button, who to hang out with, what homework to not do, or how much to study. These everyday decisions are known as low-stake decisions. Low-stake decisions are defined as decisions that do not have a direct or drastic impact to one's future. The amount of times you press the snooze button determines if you are late to school or not. The amount of studying you do will choose what grade you will get. And the friends you leads to the memories you have. High-stake decisions are the ones that dictate the course of your future. For example, what college to go to, how much money to pour into this bet, or even whether to go to war or not, which brings us to RLS. Our real-life situation is the Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1959, President Kennedy approved of a secret plan led by the CIA. The plan was to bring back Cuban exiles because they knew the land of the United States the best, and the U.S. wanted to remove them so that they did not share the landscape with the dictator because he was a communist. This attack was called the Bay of Pigs invasion, and it could not have been more unsuccessful. Not only did they fail, but it instigated the Soviet Union to begin to send arms and military advisors to Cuba. Prior to all of this, the U.S. had put their own missiles in Turkey, trying to keep it low-key, but the Russians found out, another reason why they sent military equipment to Cuba. The current leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, who was recently named ruler after the famous Joseph Stalin in 1953. The U.S. had been making routine checks on Cuba via spy planes to try to see what they were up to. Luckily, one of the spy planes spotted the missiles being prepared and reported back. When Kennedy and his advisors found out, they had two options. The first, which was supported by almost all of his advisors, was to take out Cuba quickly with a preemptive strike. But this decision had consequences. It would most likely lead to a nuclear war between Russia and the U.S. and would completely change history. The second was to wait and see. As Kennedy and his team are arguing about this, another factor was added. Khrushchev decided to send several supply ships that had more missiles to Cuba. A third option arose, to prevent these new missiles from being shipped in. Kennedy chose to put a blockade between the ships and Cuba. When those ships arrived at the blockade, there were two surprises. Two submarines were guarding the supply ships. 3 warnings were given before those submarines and ships turned around. To finally resolve the matter, last-minute negotiations were made between the U.S. and Russia. The Soviets wanted the U.S. removed from Turkey, but the U.S. could not remove their missiles formally. So they secretly removed the missiles the next time those they needed to be checked up on, which was 6 months after this feud. The Soviets also removed missiles from Cuba, and this was the end of it. This brings us to our knowledge question. To what extent does reason and emotion influence the outcome of decisions? He made several large and history-changing decisions, including the invasion of the Bay of Pigs, whether or not to bomb Cuba, to send in the U.S. blockade, and whether to listen to his brother or not. We pondered, what influenced his decision to make these decisions? What or who would have influenced his final choice? We wanted to figure out how he made a huge decision like this, which led us to our knowledge question. Let's break down our knowledge question. First, reason. Reason is the act of gathering and obtaining information through our senses from the surroundings around us. Many things can interfere with our reasoning. Little things like the amount of sleep you get and the stress can prohibit regular thought processes. Reason is the tool of understanding. It is the method of identifying entities through one's senses. They affect our decisions when we try to reason through the results of each path of a decision. Pick the one that will benefit us the most. Say you have 3 paths before you. One is rocky and steep, but short. The second is flat but long. And the third is hilly and is only an hour longer than the shortest route. Which route would you take? Most would take the third choice because it is not difficult on your feet, still is decently short, still some may still choose the other routes depending on time restraints and physical ability, but the third makes the most sense. Let's apply this to a more relatable example. A great example of reason-based decisions is purchasing stock. It solely depends on facts, like numbers, patterns, trends, and indicators. When investing money into the stock market, a professional would not buy stock based on a personal preference, if he or she is related to a member of the company, or if he simply likes the business. The stock market is a great example of reason because it is based on our thought process and our thinking when we say, if Apple has been successful in the past and has always had a great reputation, then it would be a reasonable choice to invest in Apple. Let's move on to emotion. Emotion is probably known as one of the strongest ways of knowing. There are countless numbers of emotions, but some of the major ones are, but are not limited to, anger, fear, worry, grief, joy, sadness, guilt, and jealousy. Emotion is what powers the wheels behind how and why we act on certain things. Emotion affects your mood, and your mood will develop a tone either verbally or in your body language. If your best friend is sick, you are going to feel sympathetic, and it is going to influence how you act and think, and your thoughts will be focused on them. It has an impact on decision-making when we put emotion before reason, and when we act on how we feel, which is not always the best decision. These decisions can often be clouded and opinionated because, unlike reason, they are not based on patterns but purely on how we feel. Gambling is basically all about how you feel that day. Some may use it as a port to express their emotions, or to enjoy themselves, or simply drink too much to escape life. People in casinos often will bet on how they feel that day and get caught in the cycle. By cycle, I mean the reward system. The strategy used by casinos is to have their customers spend a lot of money and only win a few times. This gives customer the idea, I already won some money, I bet I can earn all the money back and win again. The main reason why gambling is based on emotion is the appeals it makes attractive to us, like bandwagon, flattery, and a big one, transfer. Transfer is used when someone wins a jackpot or a slot machine. Loud sirens go off, trying to tell other gamblers that someone has won, and you still have a shot at winning, which entices you to try again and again. Gambling is a game about emotions. Businesses use both reason and emotion for decisions, but they're two different things. They use reason to make decisions, but the reason is based off the reaction of the people's emotions that use their products. So they use reason to predict our reactions to the product and try to make them relatable to us by the appeal to testimonial and transfer. They use testimonial when they become sponsors to athletes and try to show role models using their equipment. When transfer is in use, it is saying if you use this product, you could become as successful as this already successful person, which is what they want kids and everyone to think.
When we make decisions, another huge factor that impacts our final choice is the people and environment we are surrounded by. A few people that impacted President Kennedy were his advisors, his brother, stress, and his main family. Our surroundings can sometimes be the only reason we do something. For example, many people make poor decisions due to peer pressure, which can also play a factor in our emotions too. For an example of how peer pressure influences our decisions, we look to the Asch experiment, directed by Solomon Asch of Swarthmore College. The original experiment was conducted with 123 male participants. Each of the participants were put into groups of 5 to 7. They were then shown a card with a line on it, followed by another card with 3 lines on it labeled A, B, and C. The participants were then asked to say out loud which of the 3 lines matched in length the reference line, as well as other responses such as the length of the reference line to an everyday object, which lines were the same length, and so on. When these experiments occurred, the first 2 rounds everyone chose the correct line, but when the third round came, all but one of the participants purposely chose the wrong line, without the last participant knowing. 76% of the participants were peer pressured into choosing the wrong line, which if you do the math means only 24% of the people were not influenced. But what does this mean? This proves that not only do other people influence our decisions, but it can make us choose the obviously false choice.
One question we got from our KQ was, how does the outcome of a decision affect future decisions? When we make a decision, it has 2 possible outcomes, negative or positive. Let's break down this question. What will happen when we make a poor decision that has a poor outcome, or the opposite? what will happen when we make a good decision that has a good outcome. When we make a good decision, let's say you invested in Chipotle and its stock increased majorly in value. Next time you invest, you will be more apt to invest more because it was successful the last time you bought stock. When we make a good choice, it can impact the way we decide the next time a similar decision arises. For example, if I, Justin Von Kleiderwin, decided to go purchase some apples instead of oranges, but Benson decided to go ahead and get some oranges. And a week later, Benson gets food poisoning from the oranges, but my apples were tasty. Next time Benson or I were to have the choice to choose between apples and oranges, we would both choose apples. I would because I had a good experience previously, but Benson would not because of his poor experience with food poisoning. Let's expand this to a more useful situation. When you get a job where you interact with people, they teach you to strive for great customer service. When we get great customer service at a grocery store, restaurant, or basically any kind of shop, it sticks with us. And the next time we are deciding where to go, we will lean towards the place with better customer service than other options. For example, if we go to McDonald's and it takes forever for your food to come out, they got your order wrong, the next time you will be less likely to go to McDonald's. But if you were to go to Chick-fil-A, however, and they were respectful, got your order right, and were fast, you would be more apt to return to Chick-fil-A. Basically, the outcome of one experience can impact the next through emotion of our surroundings and how we feel about that place.
As you may know, China and India have a college entrance exam. In China, this exam is known as the Gaokao. This exam dictates what college they will attend and, in turn, how their future will unfold. To transition into a 4-year university, a grade of a C or higher is required to pass. The failure of this exam results in a dull future picking up trash or living out on the streets. No degrees are given to anyone who did poorly or failed the exam. These college exams bring the worst out of the students. They would do anything in order to pass this test. Methods of cheating are in constant use. Note cards on their legs, cheat sheets under the table, signs and signals, even tiny devices embedded within glasses, and the like, were deployed during these high-stake exams. However, in India, the parents got involved. As you can see from this video here, parents whose students are taking the Bihar board exams are scaling these buildings in order to help their students cheat.
Security is tightened at several high schools in eastern India after widespread cheating was caught on camera. Just listen to this. Friends, parents, and other relatives of the students were seen scaling the walls of some test centers this week, trying to get past and hand the answers to the test questions. Now, this comes as more than 1 million students take their 10th grade school finals. Officials say hundreds of students smuggled in textbooks or scraps of paper, which were to be used for cheating. The exams continue through next week.
For the students, these exams give them loads of stress and anxiety. It gets to the point where they feel they need to resort to suicide. According to the Chinese Communist Party, about 500 students commit suicide every year for school-related stress. In early April of 2014, a young boy hung himself simply because he was unable to finish his homework. Another jumped off the roof of his 3-story school and plunged straight into the... Let's dig a little deeper. If you had one chance to prove yourself among your peers and future coworkers, what would you do? These are the people that you are competing with for a job. How would the stress and pressure affect your thought processes? Cortisol, a stress hormone, is claimed to impair proper function within the brain. The production of this hormone is due to the lack of sleep, a change in diet, and stressful situations. A study conducted at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center found that students enrolled in a physical therapy course had a lower level of cortisol on the day of the final exam than in the fall. The researchers retrieved samples of the students' salivary cortisol levels. They were measured in the fall, both in the morning and the evening. This process was then repeated with the same group of students during the night before and the day of the test. Shockingly, the researchers discovered that the cortisol levels of the students in the fall were much greater than their levels in the spring. Of course, this study has its flaws, with its lack of isolation of the independent variable and multiple trials. Without distinguishing that cortisol is the only hormone at play, there is no way of knowing what impact it had on the students and the study as a whole. Even though the study is not reliable, it is important to compile all facts and evidence when conducting scientific experiments. Stress, however, may not be the number one cause of death as these high-stakes decisions suggest. As we mentioned, the tests in China and India determine what job you get, and by receiving a lower grade, you may potentially give up your spot in your dream college. Just like a baseball player winding up their pitch, you have to do anything to one-up your classmates, and this is where oxytocin comes in. Oxytocin is known as the love or trust hormone, but this may not always be the case. As stated by the Daily Mail, a study found that oxytocin makes women more friendlier, but conversely, it made men more competitive. Reports from the WHO mortality rates show that the suicide rates for males ages 15 to 19, or high schoolers, were significantly higher than that of the females. The Russian Federation in 2002 had about 2,000 males ages 15 to 19 per every 100,000 males commit suicide, whereas the females only had about 500. The United States in the year 2000 had about 1,000 males per 100,000 commit suicide, whereas females had nearly 300. Because the suicide rate in males is so much higher than that of females, it raises a red flag. Although these countries do not have as nearly as strict of a college entrance exam as China and India, it is still worth mentioning that colleges, in the States at least, are highly competitive. The finding that oxytocin makes males more competitive may mean that they put themselves through much more stress in order to be on top of their class than females. Pulling all-nighters for studying and endless hours of homework and reviewing all contribute to stress. All of this stress may be the cause of these suicides.
Now that we know all this, let's go back to our real-life situation. Knowing that we know what influenced our decisions and how they play a big factor, we can see how he made these decisions. His first decision, invasion of the Bay of Pigs. Kennedy was peer pressured by the CIA because they promised it would be successful, but as we know, it was not. Now we move on to his next high-stake decision, the blockade. When Kennedy decided to move in the blockade, he was influenced by two things, reason and surroundings. First, surrounding. All of his advisors were telling him to make a preemptive strike on Cuba, but Kennedy's instinct was telling him to wait and see. Second, reason. He knew if they bombed Cuba, it would cause a nuclear war, but at the same time, he thought if he were to wait and see, Russia would surely launch the missiles. He decided to go with a choice in between, try to blockade the ships, because it had multiple results. It could either lead to war or peace, and I think Kennedy felt like he wanted to leave it more up to the Russians than himself.
When it comes to making decisions, whether they are difficult or hard, they have to be made on a day-to-day basis. Time doesn't just stop because you are frazzled. Life continues on, and that is where I come to my point of decisions either being a help or a hinder. Sometimes decisions help us learn and grow, and we get better at making them. Sometimes they'll do just the opposite, and we avoid and almost fear making decisions. Sometimes the reasons why we are afraid of making decisions for ourselves is because we are used to someone else making them for us. That leads me to the question: how can fear as an emotion control our willingness to make decisions for ourselves? Whether we have had a bad experience in the past, or we are just not used to having to deal with it. This even comes into play with simple everyday decisions. Do I want to eat a cookie or an apple. Well, reasoning would tell me that I should eat the apple because it is healthy, while my emotions may be telling me to eat the cookie because it tastes a lot better, and that's what I want, and that's what I'm craving. For some people, this is the point where they lie to themselves, and others their conscience guides them. The people that lie to themselves may become overweight, and it is not until they're struggling with their weight that they fear making decisions about what to eat anymore, because they see where it has led them up to. This is just one example, but there are many more, such as debt and even loans. If you choose not to pay the money, it will get you into big trouble and you will have bad credit. These are high-stakes decisions that can get you in a big mess if you don't make the right decisions.
It's been a